It is August 1984. A team of anthropologists on a remote Canadian island are digging into the permafrost. They are standing over a grave marked 1846. They have been chipping at the frozen earth for days. When they finally lift the lid of the coffin, the men gasp. Lying inside, encased in a block of solid ice, is John Torrington. He is 20 years old. He has been dead for 138 years. But he doesn't look dead. The Arctic has perfectly preserved him. He looks like he is just waking up from a long, cold sleep. His eyes are open, staring back at the researchers. Torrington was the first to die, the lucky one, because the 128 men who survived him were about to enter a living hell that we are still trying to unbury today. May 1845, the dawn of the Victorian Golden Age. Science and technology were conquering the globe, and the British Empire set its sights on the final prize, the Northwest Passage, a trade route over the top of the world. To do it, they assembled the greatest polar expedition in history. They took 2 bomb vessels, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. These were floating fortresses designed to withstand mortar recoil. They reinforced the bows with thick iron plating to smash through ice. They installed state-of-the-art steam engines, left over from railway locomotives, to power propellers. They had hot water piping to heat the cabins. They packed enough supplies for 3 years. Not just hardtack and salted beef. They carried 8,000 tins of new, patented preserved meats, soups, and vegetables. It was the 19th century equivalent of a mission to Mars. They were invincible. In command was Sir John Franklin, a national hero. At 59, he was perhaps too old for the Arctic, but his confidence was infectious. His second in command, Captain Francis Crozier, was less optimistic, a hardened Irishman who had spent far more time in the ice than Franklin. He knew the Arctic didn't care about steam engines or British pride. In his final letter home, Crozier wrote a chilling prediction: "I fear we will never meet again." On May 19, 1845, the 129 men of the Franklin expedition sailed out of the Thames estuary. In July, they were spotted by whalers in Baffin Bay, waiting for the ice to clear. They sailed west, into the labyrinth of the Canadian archipelago. And then, silence. For 2 years, the world heard nothing. No letters, no sightings, just an empty, frozen horizon. The most advanced expedition on Earth had simply vanished. What happened next, we only know through forensic reconstruction. The summer of 1845 passed easily. They made good time. As winter approached, they found a sheltered harbor at Beechy Island. They hunkered down for the long polar night. It was a hard winter. 3 men died, including young John Torrington. But 3 deaths out of 129 wasn't panic-inducing. This was the Arctic after all. They buried their dead, fired up the steam engines, and waited for the summer thaw of 1846 to break the ice so they could continue west. Summer came, but the thaw did not. The temperature barely rose above freezing. The massive engines of the Erebus and Terror pushed against the pack, burning precious coal, but the ice didn't budge. They were trapped in the Victoria Strait. A second winter set in. The realization began to dawn on 126 men. Their cutting-edge technology was useless. Their reinforced hulls were now just iron cages. Their 3 years of food supply was suddenly only enough for 1 more year. They were entombed, and something else was going wrong inside the ships. The men were becoming strangely lethargic, irritable, paranoid. The ship doctors recorded vague symptoms: headaches, joint pain, a dark fog settling over the minds of the crew. They didn't know it, but the poison was already in their veins. By 1848, England was in a panic. Lady Jane Franklin, Sir John's wife, became a relentless force, lobbying the Admiralty to send rescue missions. Over the next decade, more ships and men would be lost looking for Franklin than were on the original expedition. They found empty camps. They found the 3 graves at Beechy Island. But the 126 men and 2 massive warships remained missing. It became the greatest mystery of the age. The Victorian Titanic. The searchers were looking for ships. They assumed Franklin was still waiting for rescue. They didn't realize that back on the ice, the expedition had already completely collapsed. The breakthrough didn't come from a massive Navy ship. It came from John Ray, a surveyor for the Hudson's Bay Company. Traveling light across the land in 1854, Ray encountered a group of Inuit families. They had items they shouldn't have had: silver spoons with officers' crests, a gold watch, a medal belonging to Captain Crozier. The Inuit told Ray a terrifying story. For winters prior, They had seen a group of about 40 kablooners, white men dragging heavy boats, south over the ice. They were thin. Their mouths were black and bleeding from scurvy. They could barely stand. They bought some seal meat from the Inuit, then kept walking into the wasteland. Later that season, the Inuit found the corpses, 30 bodies at a camp near the mouth of the Great Fish River. The Inuit told Ray details that turned the mystery into a horror story. Ray wrote in his report to the Admiralty, "From the mutilated state of many of the bodies and the contents of the kettles, it is evident that our wretched countrymen had been driven to the last dread alternative as a means of sustaining life, cannibalism. The pride of the British Navy, reduced to eating their dead. Victorian society was outraged. They called John Ray a liar. But the truth was even worse than Ray imagined." 5 years later, another search team found the only written record the expedition ever left behind. A standard Admiralty form found under a pile of stones on King William Island. The handwriting in the margins tells the story of the final collapse. It revealed that Sir John Franklin had died back in June of 1847, before the ships were even abandoned. The cause of death was never recorded. By April 1848, the ships had been trapped in ice for 19 months. Captain Crozier made a desperate decision. The note reads, "HM ships Terror and Erebus were deserted on the 22nd April. Having been beset since the 12th of September 1846, the officers and crews, consisting of 105 souls, under the command of Captain F.R.M. Crozier, land here." Crozier's plan was madness born of desperation. They abandoned the safety of the ships and attempted to manhaul heavy wooden lifeboats filled with supplies, hundreds of miles south to the nearest fur trading outpost. It was a death march. Archaeologists retracing the route found a trail of skeletons stretching for miles along the coast of King William Island. They dropped one by one, and as they died, the survivors began to make choices that defy comprehension. Modern forensic analysis of the bones confirms John Ray's report. Cut marks on the femurs and skulls, pot polishing on the ends of bones, indicating they were boiled in kettles to extract marrow. But the most baffling discovery was what they were carrying. The sledges they dragged weighed hundreds of pounds, but they weren't just filled with food. They were filled with heavy sterling silver cutlery, curtain rods, desk accessories, books. Men dying of starvation were dragging useless artifacts of civilization into the void, unable to let go of the world they had lost. The ships themselves were finally found in 2014 and 2016, sitting perfectly upright on the seafloor, exactly where the Inuits said they sank. But the final piece of the puzzle wasn't found in the ships. It was found in the bodies of the men. Tests on hair and bone samples from the remains revealed astronomical levels of lead. The culprit was the cutting-edge technology they were so proud of. Those 8,000 tins of preserved food were sealed with lead soda. The soda had dripped into the food. For 3 years, the men had been slowly poisoning themselves with every meal. Lead poisoning causes fatigue, paranoia, and eventually, madness. The 129 men of the Franklin expedition didn't just vanish into the ice. They walked into it, poisoned by their own provisions, their minds deteriorating along with their bodies, until the only choice left was the unthinkable. The Arctic keeps its secrets well, but sometimes it lets them thaw just enough for us to see the horror frozen in